planet's on fucking fire.
Welcome back to Backyard Politics. I'm Nikki.
I'm Maddie.
And we are honored today because this is our first interview on Backyard Politics. We have Shelly here. She's going to tell us a little bit about direct democracy. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started and what direct democracy is.
Educate us.
Yeah, tell us what it is.
Well, first off, I got started with all this when Bernie dropped out in 2020. And it was kind of like a, hey, what do we do now thing? And Grandma was going to come up a lot in this intro, so just a fair warning. But
cool.
I messaged him. It was like my first chat donation. I'm like, what do you think of a constitutional convention? And he completely just was like, hey, you need to read The Failures of Representative Government and the Solution by Mike Gravel. I did that. And then ever since then, I'm just like, this needs to happen. And it's kind of going on 1 year for me now doing this. But what is in the book basically puts forth two pieces of legislation that has been decades in the making. And Mike Gravel wrote it all, put it all together, explains the process on how it'd be enacted. And I'm going to give sort of a summary of that.
Yeah, sure.
And then go forward. So I don't know how much you or your audience knows about how we got the Constitution we have today. But before
pretend like we don't know anything.
We're new to this earth.
I mean, that's fair. So was I a year ago. I was like, I have no idea. But I guess before we had the Constitution, we had this thing called the Articles of Confederation. And the main way we were able to switch from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution was through Article 7 of the Constitution, stating that 2/3 vote was able to overturn the Articles of Confederation at the time by majority rule. Same type of 2/3 vote that it takes for Congress to overturn a veto, or 2/3 vote that it takes to introduce a new amendment to our Constitution. And so that's exactly what we'd be doing. We'd be introducing an amendment to the Constitution with a 2/3 vote. Now, here's the tricky part, because voting is so difficult, and this was done through like a constitutional convention and representatives. So instead of going through representatives at each state level and having 50 representatives plus the territories come together and hold a constitutional convention, we're going to go straight towards the people and get 2/3 of them to go through and be in favor of it. And this has to be the most like legit, beyond legit vote that took place in all of history. So like when we go through and check it, it has to pass an audit. Everyone that votes has to be like proven that, yes, I am a citizen. I can put my claim there and back it up. And that's it. It's just, that's the process of how it would take to.
I'll be right back.
Sorry, our dogs are really annoying.
Oh, I'm used to it. I'm so used to it. Hence the headphones.
Yeah.
My dog go crazy. She still might. I'm not going to promise anything. Yeah. So it would be. I actually redid the math to go up with the current election because I was going off of the last presidential vote, which is the only national election where you can get the numbers from to do the 2/3.
Mm-hmm.
So I just recently updated them. So we need 106 million people just to be in favor of it and vote yes. And then that number, and through that national vote, it becomes the law of the land. And that's how the whole amending the Constitution for this to be able to go works. The actual legislation itself, once it's passed. So do you have a law you'd like passed before I go?
I don't know specifically.
How about abolish prisons was, I think, one that you did throw it on
Yeah,
Twitter.
perfect. That'd be perfect.
Okay.
Sorry, you
So
put me on the spot.
no, you're cool. You're cool. I'll go through this and maybe you guys can both come up with laws you'd like to pass.
Oh, definitely, private prisons should be illegal.
Yeah.
I mean, 100%.
Well, and I was gonna mention overturning Citizens United, which, you know, I don't necessarily watch TYT, but Wolfpack was trying to do that, and that's how they were going about it too, was the 2/3 to amend the Constitution. So it is possible to do this.
Yes. Which that was the hardest thing for me to go over. Now it's just finding the 106 million people, which there's more people that don't vote than do vote. So I know the numbers are out there.
Mm-hmm.
But this basically, what this legislation does is direct democracy is like an initiative form. So I don't know, is California an initiative state?
I don't know.
No positive.
We're in Oregon.
Oregon.
So I'm not sure about California. Do you know about here?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
I know Washington is.
I think it is.
Okay. Well, what it is an initiative. Like I'm in Michigan, we're an initiative state.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we have one of the more progressive initiative platforms in the country, it's still not nearly as good as what I'm about to explain. But basically what it is so you want to abolish private prisons. Mm-hmm. This is how you go through the procedure process to put forth a law to do so. So there's 9 steps total, and it takes anywhere between a year or 2 years for the legislation to become a law. So you call up the Citizens Trust, which is the People's Legislature, which would be added on to Congress, and sort of the bookies or the officials that would be in charge of this. Mm-hmm. Say, hey, I have a piece of legislation I'd like to pass. Could you have an attorney look over it? Step 2, the attorney looks over it, drafts up the legislation. So now there's official legislation saying, hey, this is how I would like to abolish private prisons. Step 3, you, the person who came up with the legislation, would commission a national poll and get 40% of people in favor for it to go to the next step. If it fails, it stops there and process starts over again. But if it goes through, and the reason why is just to show there's enough support for it, because everyone's going to want to put forth something. Right. This way, there's at least enough support for it to go through.
When you say 40%, is that just 40% of like registered voters that are in favor of it, or is that more of a general population kind of a petition signing?
That is a general. That's a good question. That I believe is a general population.
Okay. Cool. That's good.
I know I wanted to touch this. I'm going to touch on this right now because I noticed you signed the petition and you asked why is it important to know if you're a registered voter or not. Because when we do the actual national vote for it to go through, not for this, but for the legislation for the 2/3 vote, it has to pass like every audit possible, has to pass all of that. So if we can just like prove, okay, this many people voted already, so you don't have to worry about them. So it's more of an organizational reason is why it's there.
I was curious because like, you know, we were talking about, and you touched on already too, that a lot of people just don't vote. And I think part of the reason with that is that they don't have something to vote that they believe in. But if there's, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Even a lot of the people that do vote don't even believe in what they're voting, as far as the people that strictly vote red or blue. But like with stuff that you're saying, if there's just like a general idea that we can all agree on, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, or if you're like us and you kind of say, fuck the aisle, we should be for the people, not for the party. I think a lot of people could get behind that, especially if it was like driven on a social level and not on a political level. I think there'd be a higher turnout of people interested because they're looking at it on like a no matter what the subject, on like a humanitarian point of view instead of, like I said, a political scheme.
Yeah, that's why when I go through this, I always ask whoever I'm explaining it to what kind of laws you'd like to pass, because everyone has one.
Yeah.
I come from a conservative background, so I want to do tax reform.
Okay.
I know.
Well, I have a question real quick, because this would also help connect, you know, the more conservative with the more liberal. If we were able to do direct democracy, would this abolish Congress?
No, we'd be working with Congress. But,
Okay.
But it would be more of a vanity project to run for Congress than it would be anything official, just because of the efficiency of this.
Okay.
So, I mean, yes and no in the same breath. I mean, you could pass a law to abolish Congress through there. So, I mean, there's a lot of power here.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
And it returns it to the people where it should be.
Exactly. The whole direct action type of thing. But with direct action also comes direct responsibility and direct consequences.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, but I think we're mature enough to do that now.
I would hope
At least a general population.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Before we go to, I know my questions come randomly. It'll be quiet.
No, that's cool. That's cool. I love it.
Are there examples globally of any nation attempting this or being successful or not successful?
I know there are some nations that have a form of direct democracy.
Okay.
And I want to say there's some like smaller countries, like third world countries that have a form of direct democracy, just due to their size.
Sure.
But I don't think, not a form specifically like this. This is based off of a lot of the European style forms of direct democracy and a lot of their failures. So this is more of learning from people's mistakes and trying not to redo their mistakes.
Okay. Because a lot of, not just right wing, but a lot of Americans, like when they start talking even like about the concept of like borrowing ideas from other nations around the globe, they're like, well, that's not the American way. We can't do it that way. Just like a lot of people that are against Medicare for all, even though it works really well in other parts of the world, they're against it. So like, just from a sales point of view, I think that could be something to really push on. It's like, hey, this could be like the first time that a large first world country does something this big. You know what I mean? It'd be like,
that would be true.
Not to like placate or anything, but that could be a way to get folks, especially on the far right, to be like, oh, well, America's going to do this one first.
Well, it could bring the far right and the far left together because it's for the people. Like we've been talking about, red, blue, and all that crap.
Yeah.
And that's kind of exactly what I want to do. Like, I mean, truthfully, and this is going to sound horrible to say, but I really don't care. But like, people are like, the Boogaloo Boys are a white supremacist gang, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's fine. At the end of the day, they're Americans and they're going to get fucked as much as we are. So I'd rather, like, no matter what kind of alliance it is or temporary truce, like, let's do this and then we can go our separate ways. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, there's horrible people that are Americans too.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's just worse people in Congress is all.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Maddie, could you email me that idea when this is all over?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, because that was a really good idea.
I just have to remember what the idea was, and then I will.
Your sales pitch. He's a salesman, so like it just keeps coming out of his mouth.
Well, I like the idea of sales is to like open somebody's mind into how something could work for them, no matter what the product or idea is. And realistically speaking, I mean, with the ideas that you're talking about, like to me, that's an easy sell. Like just approaching anybody on the street, hey, What if your voice was heard? What if, as a collective, we made decisions together instead of the bullshit process that we have now?
Mhm.
No matter what side you're on, almost everybody would agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm sold. That you're really good at this.
She's gonna recruit you.
Possibly. Yeah. So step 3 is just to get 40% in favor through a national poll that at the moment costs roughly $40,000. And that's the whole just gaining support and monetarily and just of the overall general population. The Citizens Trust would be, so step 4 would be the Citizens Trust would open up a national hearing on the People's Legislature website, which the People's Legislature would be what would be added on to Congress, and they would work with like the House of Representatives and the Senate, which comes into this process later. But the People's Legislature, so it'd be transparent. Everything would be on the website. Anyone around the world could see it. And they just hold hearings to allow experts to weigh in on explain the legislation. So for private prisons, maybe you could have a prisoner that's been in different levels, state, local, federal, explain the private prison system versus the public system, how that would work. And that would go on for 1 week. Then step 5, after the hearings, the legislation would be sent to a deliberative body, and they just deliberate the legislation and iron out all the fine details. So after going through and having everyone weigh in on it, maybe they discovered some problem with funding for why in certain states this happens, in other states this happens. So they just iron out the fine details with that. But it doesn't actually change the legislation. You're still getting rid of private prisons. It just irons out the details for it to go more fluidly. Then the deliberative body would send the legislation to Congress for a yes or no vote, and they would have 90 days to do so. This is a non-binding advisory vote. So even if they vote no, it still goes forward. But as being part of the legislature and part of the legislation process, they need to know what's going on. And they got 90 days to do so. So even if they don't, it still goes forward.
Right. This helps also, like how everybody waits around for the stimulus because there's back and forth and all that crap. This helps actually, like, there's a time limit on it. So you have X amount of days before it's due, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
Accountability.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And it's not like it's accountability where someone's watching over your shoulder. This is like a form of self-accountability. Like if you fail, it's on you.
Yeah.
And our system is so biased right now, and it's so like no wonder the squad and AOC and people that are like, hey, don't cut Social Security, they're like, what's Social Security except for more money we have to give away? Like that's just how they view it. Yeah, they didn't stand a chance. Step 7, then the legislation would be scheduled for a vote, and the people would have a week for the vote. And at the end of the week, the legislation passes. And at the end of the week, if the legislation passes, not when the legislation passes. If the legislation passes by the end of the week, it goes on for a second vote 6 months later. But if the law fails, or if the legislation fails, stops there, process has to restart if you want to go through it. All the way back to calling the Citizens Trust. Then second vote would happen 6 months later. And again, the people would have a week to vote. And if it passes, because same thing, if it fails, then it goes back to the first step. But if the legislation passes, an announcement is made to enact the legislation, and you have a new law. Congratulations, you've just abolished private prisons.
That's really cool. I like how straightforward it is. Sorry, there's an airplane. I got all the background noises today.
Those aren't sound bites.
Right. I love how like straightforward it is. You're very knowledgeable with it. So like major kudos to you.
Read the legislation and translated it into simple terminology.
Well, you make it sound so simple. You know your stuff.
Thank you.
It's really impressive.
One thing that like I'm intriguing from my point of view is a lot of like really good ideas never make it into law. Not because that, you know, people don't agree on that specific idea of a new law, but because when things try to get passed through our upper government, it's like, okay, here's the one idea, but if you vote yes on this, we attached 47 other things that involved conflicts globally and everything else that has nothing to do with this specific law we're trying to pass. And that's why, you know, we lose trust in a lot of just in politics in general. We lose trust because we're like, well, why did you vote for this? And well, I didn't vote for that. That was a part of the larger bill that I had to vote for it. If we get rid of all of that muck and bullshit and just focus on individual topics, good God almighty, like that would be phenomenal.
I mean, just think what we could get done.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say you're just driving it from like a Democratic side of the aisle. If you put it through a Republican side, they'll just put it there so it fails. Like the same reason they'll put up lawsuits. It's like, you're not gonna pass like a $50 increase on the military budget. No. And then the law will fail.
Yeah.
But the let me see if I can find it. Oh, the really cool thing is, because the voting process only takes a week, even though the process to turn the legislation into law is anywhere from a year to 2 years, but the actual vote itself is a week, you can pass up to 52 laws per year.
That's impressive. I mean, we don't even do one a year still.
That's a lot of potential progress.
Yeah.
Do you think that like and I don't mean to like talk down about people at all, but do you think that some people might find that much potential progress overwhelming? You know what I mean? Because
like the more conservative.
No. I mean,
right?
people in general, because people have a hard enough time voting, you know, every 4 years. They have a hard enough time voting every 2 years.
Oh,
Do you think that it might be overwhelming for the general populace to take on that much potential progress?
Yes and no, because I believe I understand where you're coming from with this. It comes down to the person's responsibility and what level of politics they want to be engaged in. Like,
Sure.
I mean, if it's a vote to raise, I'm very involved in politics, but let me think of, okay, universal health care is a big thing, but what if it's legislation for all animals in America to get universal health care? I mean,
do humans count as animals?
Well, that is the weirdest damn thing I've ever heard.
Nope. These aren't humans. These are just
There would be no debate if it's dogs, right? Or animals.
But we're talking horses, cats, rats, wolves, all of them. And so, I mean, a lot of people be like, well, I'm not an animal lover. I'm a hunter. Why would I vote for that? That's ridiculous. You don't have to vote for it. This is the thing. But if you're poorly like affected by it, next time the vote comes around, you're going to want to vote. And that's sort of a learning curve. There's a lot of learning curves with direct democracy because it is something is as great of a representation it is for our country. It's not something we're used to.
Sure.
So
don't you think that it would also like help motivate people to be politically active? Kind of like how even if we don't know, I don't want to give Trump credit. He did do that. Like
he pissed people off
to pay attention. And so it motivated me, for example, to know what's going on. So wouldn't giving the power to the people give them more motivation to be politically active?
Yes. It might be a little bit of a rough growth spurt, but yes, that's exactly what it would do. It'd motivate people to be more politically active, more involved. And maybe people like you and me that are like super involved and want to change anything, it'll give us a chance to focus on the things we care about instead of trying to save everything.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be really cool like 20 years from now, when this is normal, hopefully, and it's like a part of our education system. So like instead of the random historical facts that are completely biased that we learn about throughout kindergarten through graduation, like if that was a part of the curriculum, it's like, okay, so we're a part of this direct democracy. Here's our you are going to be involved because it matters,
And here's how you participate.
right, like they teach kids all these things in school, but like what if 20 years from now that was just part of the normal curriculum? It's like, oh yeah, I got my
Could be.
8 credits or whatever for direct democracy and education, and now I'm ready to be a contributing citizen to this.
That would have.
So
I'm just daydreaming.
Oh no, that'd be perfect. I wish. So you need 106 million people to be in favor of it and to vote yes in a national vote for it to become the law of the land. And that's more or less the hardest part, because the main reason in the beginning I stated I got into this because I asked Grandma Elwood about a constitutional convention. Well, that's where my Republican roots always took me. I don't know if you know, but the Koch brothers have always been trying to get a constitutional convention, and they held like a mock constitutional convention. And I'm like, this version's stupid as fuck, because you're like trying to recreate something that happened over 300 years ago. That's just stupid.
Yeah.
But this is like a modern day version of this. And with the internet and everything, it could be so transparent and open. Like what you were saying with the educational system. So I didn't know this till later in life because I did go to public school and I got a horrible education thanks to that. But I guess the whole point of Black History Month was to actually have equal history and education for like all minorities. It wasn't just supposed to be to honor MLK and his defeat of racism. It was supposed to be to just open up the actual history and be like, Black people have done amazing things throughout history. It wasn't just, and they deserve more than a month. They deserve a history book, just like white people do. In fact, it'd be really awesome if it was just an honest, integrated version of a history book.
Yeah. God, seriously.
It's kind of like when you watch the news, it's not really the news. And that's what history books are. It's, history written by the winners, trying to sway you, for patriotism or sway you in one way or another. But if it was just like
money related,
if it was just like honest, real, like factual timeline of what happened and why, again, I go back to trust with it. That's why people don't trust the education system, because it's biased. That's why they don't trust most news outlets, because they're completely biased. If it was just facts, I think more people would pay attention, because they wouldn't have that guard up all the time of like, okay, wait, I need to pick out the bullshit to see through for the little bit of truth that is there. If we eliminated that and gained trust overall, but we could do amazing things.
This would also help take money out of politics too.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, you could totally pass a law to do that.
So many benefits to this.
Do you think, just like thinking, and again, call me a dreamer, but
okay.
do you think like big picture, broader spectrum, with a movement like this, do you think that is an appropriate and possible step towards abolishing like the Electoral College? Because there's similar concepts to how our laws are passed and how the Electoral College works.
Possible. I believe the whole point of the reason of why it's 270 votes of the Electoral College is because that is 2/3 vote of the Electoral College. So, I mean, it's possible. Legislation would have to be drafted and put through, and I'm no legislator, but it is definitely possible.
Yeah.
I am currently working on, because I do live in an initiative state in Michigan, to do a state level version of this for my state. As you may or may not know, Flint still has the water crisis going on.
Yeah.
We've recently tried to kidnap our governor because I guess propaganda runs free, and we have the most amount of resources that are currently benefiting Canada over anyone else, including the health of us. So, yeah, I would really like to see this, at least bare minimum, something in my state.
For sure.
Um,
I'm really honestly impressed at how much you know about all of this. Like just from being motivated. Like I got motivated from watching Graham too. Like, okay, you're telling us all these things that you're doing. I feel like a hypocrite not doing something. So I got my ass out there and tried to do something. And now hearing you and then also our mutual online friend Sharif, who got started with like
I wish he was
Medicare
here
for All
today.
stuff.
He's
Yeah,
amazing.
Next time.
It's really cool how like just how all of this works out with the community.
Yes. And I mean that's the whole thing. Like we have local communities and state communities, but at a federal level, we don't act like a community because it's trying to defeat that. But you're right. We are a community. We are a community at a national level, including our brothers and sisters, not just in our territories, but in the places we occupy as well.
Yeah.
So that's all of us. There are new developments. So I don't know if I said this on or off camera when you started, but Sharif did explain an amazing concept of how a general strike would work. And I wanted to touch on that.
Yes.
Right now, we are calling it the umbrella concept. Currently, umbrella concepts deal with ideas, and it's just encapsulating them all underneath, and then they're covered by everything. So as an umbrella looks, there's one point at the top, but then it branches out to a bunch of other sections and encompasses everybody within. But instead of separating people by things that divide them, like place or color or religion and other stuff that divides people, focus on the divisions that can combine people, like their ideas, their beliefs. Everyone wants a UBI. So there's UBI tax reform is one bubble. Healthcare is another bubble. Election accountability, universal education. These are all like free speech. Right now we have 3 that we're working on building up, and that's free speech, healthcare, and it's workers' rights. But hang on, I think I have the image. Let me pull up the image really quick.
Yeah, sure.
I want to make sure I say it right. Oh yeah, unions and a living wage. So that would be like Congress for the essential workers, unions, Teamsters, healthcare would play things like Whole Washington, March for Medicare for All, Force the Vote. Free speech would be groups like Gray Zone, Status Quo, All Independent Media on Rockfin. And because these are people that are passionate about their about what they're due. It's in their living. It's more like you're going off of the power of self-preservation, and that's what you're appealing to. You're appealing to their self-preservation because like you and Maddie are independent media with backyard politics. Mm-hmm. You guys are a very small channel in comparison to like Kyle Klinsky and Crystal Ball.
Yeah.
But now imagine a place where you guys can all work together to not just build legislation for free speech, but you could just kind of have each other's back in a way, like report problems to notice so they can be aware of them. They could go through, and I'm not a free speech. I don't know a lot about free speech. I know it's necessary, but all that stuff considered with free speech and journalism and censorship and the fight against censorship, it would be a place for you guys to get together and hash it out like once a week. Oh, the puppy.
Yeah, like networking.
Yes. It'd be like a network by issue under the umbrella concept, and then each network would have like a representative who, it doesn't always have to be the same person, just like a representative that like takes notes, submit them, and then the umbrella concept kind of goes into a general strike and the direct democracy thing with I've been called with the People's Legislature. I've been calling it the People's Assembly. I've been working with a group called By the People, which they also helped come up with the umbrella concept. So I think it's going to kind of turn into like a By the People thing, and it just has like right there they can just allow an area for everybody to network with one another. But in a way that, how can I word this? But in a way that's beneficial for the whole picture. So the way the general
Sounds like
strike,
socialism.
it's a little bit beyond socialism, actually.
I didn't mean in a bad way.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
So the Free Speech Network would go through and they would develop legislation for a general strike. They would keep everyone informed, up to date on like a censorship and how that's going, where to post, where not to post, when to post to get the best out there, and just all that minor stuff. And because that's what the details are everything. So in relation to how that'd work with a general strike is Sharif had like the nicest version of it, and I love him for that. But I made it a little bit more hardcore. What I said was, so we all agreed to have a general strike on said date. I just threw out June 1st because that'd give us 30 days before the eviction moratoriums come to an end, and then everyone goes out in their streets.
Yeah.
So like June 1st, we have 10 pieces of legislation from 10 different issues. So we're talking about free speech, but it'd also be like universal housing, healthcare, election accountability, like just 10 issues. And each of those 10 issues would put forward one piece of legislation. And then we would demand that Congress use their lawmaking authority to pass the legislation. And we'd be totally fair to them. We know how difficult this is. So they'd have from like 5 a.m. on Monday morning to 5 p.m. Monday night. And if they fail to do so, we just released 10 more pieces of legislation at 5 p.m. on Friday night. And then we again strike another week. And we just continue the process until Congress passed all of the pre-drafted pieces of legislation.
I love it. That's really like well thought out, well structured.
I'm not against that. Right now they have zero accountability.
Yeah.
So this would be a good,
And it really, oh, what was that?
It'd just be a good way to whip them into shape. Do your damn job, basically.
And it operates the same as this. So these, the representatives that write the legislation, or maybe they want to just put forth some good people in each network, that's what would build up the first group in the Citizens Trust that would run the People's Legislature. Because a general strike would take more than 106 million people to pull off. Like, let's be realistic. It's going to take a lot of people. It's going to take networking. It's going to take all that. With this concept, the people that participate in the general strike, you just have them get on favor, and then either during the general strike or after the general strike, depending on if Congress actually wants to participate or not, we could just pass the laws anyway. It would just be 1 to 2 years before the laws become laws is all. So either way the legislation would get through, it would just be how long.
Yeah. As far as like moving forward next steps in getting people on board and organized, do you see like not to like, hold anybody obligated, but do you see like this concept being more on somewhat of a schedule? Like you were talking about the 52 weeks of the year, the 52 options to get legislation passed, but do you think it would be productive or counterproductive to be like, okay, week's end is coming up, we are going to put something forward that we agree on? Like, you know what I mean? Like schedule, like, all right, not like flavor of the week style, but in a way, do you think that would be productive to approach it that way? Like, okay, guys, rally up. It's time to do this thing.
Depends on the implementation, because if it's not implemented right, it will be horrible. But the reason that I have the time concepts down so far is to give an idea of how long they take to go in between each step.
Okay.
Like, obviously, a general strike isn't going to happen on June 1st. That's pretty obvious. Everyone is probably going to be homeless unless Congress decides to do something. Like that's the reality of what we're looking towards. Okay. Yeah. Well, going up from there, because I did start it to go from March 22nd to June 1st, and that's like basically how long it would take to have so it take roughly 3 months for each of the networks to put forward legislation, come up with a way to make sure that people are taken care of, get sort of used to working with each other, because you're going to have people that aren't used to talking. I mean, you could be in the same room with Nick Fuentes. How do we make sure you guys don't kill each other?
Good question.
Like, I mean, that's the truth. That's the truth. So that would be like problems. And then I think 3 months would be enough time to go through, because you're going for a goal. So you have to stay goal focused to do that.
Yeah.
The reason why I think the strike should at least plan for being 30 days is because, I mean, we saw that our country can survive 30 days. The economy can't survive 30 days without intervention. Right. And so that's kind of what we'd be blowing a gasket into, is the economy. And they're not going to answer to us. They're going to answer to their donors if the economy blows.
So I have a question, because here we've had in Oregon specifically a lot of people, rightfully so, pissed off at our governor because we've had shutdowns and like we haven't been taken care of. And so if they're like small business owners, how do we convince them to get on board with this?
Simple. Have them, like, this is where the networking comes in. This is where talking with the organizations, the local communities, and being like, how do you make sure you don't go out of business in the meantime? Well, if they're still operating, but they're operating in like a way that's like productive for the community. So it depends on what the business is. Like, let's say you're a franchisee store and you have an obligation to the people to do so. You're going to go open. You will be hurt if you go open. Strikes are not easy. Strikes are not nice. Strikes are none of that.
Yeah.
If you close, just be like, I'm closing. Because even though that's the case, they might not close in the first week. They might not close in the second week, but by the third week, with no one coming in, they're going to have to look at their books and be like, do I stay? Do I go? Do I join? What do I do?
True, yeah. And enough pressure.
And that's the thing. And I mean, I get it. You're looking at pocketbooks. You're looking at people who haven't worked in maybe a year now, because it's been a year. It's been a year.
I know. God.
But in the same breath, you could look at stores like co-ops, and you could look at stores that are big business stores. The big business stores, they'll be hurt just as much as the small businesses if they don't have workers there.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole point of the organization and the networking and where businesses could come in to help is they could close their doors in solidarity with them, and they could work with the organizations with what they have and their skills. Because people will need food, people will need housing, people will need clean water, people will need access to healthcare. Which, I mean, every part of where our government's failed, organizations and nonprofits, they've been there to pick up the slack. So that foundation is already there, but it's going to involve small businesses, like you said, joining that. And you don't actually have to do healthcare stuff. Like, I don't know what you guys do for a living, but let's say, Maddie, you do nails. So,
How do you know?
I love it.
so I mean, you could be working on your skill, your trade, doing nails, so and so, to help people in the community. Because I know you're probably a professional at doing nails, Maddie, so you can probably tell it more than me, but nails can tell health, nails, the skin of it can show diseases, and the study of all that work. So it's not just beautification, there's more there. Also, let's say you are a franchisee owner. You've been doing books for 30 years and getting screwed over. Would you rather stand with the organizations who will support you during this time, and you can just use your booking skills to help them manage everything? Or do you want to keep on seeing everything go downhill? It's that take a hard look in the mirror, say, yeah, I'm 30 pounds overweight, my boobs are saggy, and I don't look how I did when I was 21. It just that honest to God.
I love you. This is awesome.
Are you talking directly to me?
I felt like she was
or-
talking to me. Oh.
No, I can't see anything behind those beautiful sunglasses, Maddie. I'm not talking
To touch on what you were saying, like that's a hard I don't want to word it as a hard sell, but that is always the tough thing. Is like, take somebody, for example, that wholeheartedly believes that we should do a general strike, but that same individual, and there's millions and millions of people in this situation, if they miss 2 days of work, they're fucked. They don't
I
want to
just got my dream
continue.
job. I love my dream job, and I struggle with that same idea. Like, even
Yeah.
though I'm all gun for and I'm like, I know it'll work, I struggle with that same idea. And I'm like, I just got this really nice job. It makes a lot of money, but it's like, it goes back to the whole idea of individualism versus community. Like, when this network is here and it's built up, and let's say the healthcare network, I'm like, well, maybe I can talk to the people in the healthcare network and see where I go and how I help my community. Or do I keep on going with how it's going and just say, hey, I survive, but fuck you guys.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was saying, like, as far as like selling it to people that are on the daily worried that they're going to lose their job. It's like they don't want to continue the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck for a shitty company that they hate just to survive. But they're also equally, if not more, afraid that they might not even have that if they were to stand up. You know what I mean? So it's like, I understand that fear, and like, how do we overcome that? I know the networking thing, 100%. I'm on board with that as far as having each other's backs and stuff. But how do we alleviate that fear for like just the everyday working Joe that is terrified that they're going to lose their house if they make a noise,
So this is where the networking connects to the general strike, the legislation, and passing legislation. Because if there's enough people in favor of this, the legislation is guaranteed to pass once the national vote is held to amend the Constitution. A general strike is a faster way of getting that legislation needed to pass. And then just doing a national vote afterwards to make sure the legislation doesn't pass. The point of networking and making sure that that structure and foundation is there is so when the bad stuff does happen, the community, the national community, the community that includes the territories and the occupied places, doesn't allow that suburban mom in Minnesota to fail.
Okay.
And so those organizations come together and be like, okay, So this is the place near you where you can use there's water. Like we could even just have like a water distribution system, everyone involved, they get food on their doorstep once a week while the whole process can take place, because you're talking between, at max, it'd have to last between 2 years after a national vote, so it could be 2.5 years, which is still before Joe Biden would go for his reelection campaign. So that's kind of it. I mean, it's a hard reflection and it's a tough pill to swallow, but
Yeah.
you're also making sure that people are taken care of. Like, I know there's plenty of farmers. I mean, maybe you'll see a lot of people from New York that do become homeless go out to Kansas and wind up living on farms there because there's shelter there. I can't promise it'll all work out good, but I can promise and guarantee that if this goes through, we can pass those pieces of legislation. That is my only guarantee.
Well, the networking sounds like the mutual aid that's going on here, as far as like when the wildfires were happening, or just like for feeding our unsheltered community. There's like a bunch of networking going on behind the scenes, and then people come together, whether out in public or anonymously, to help feed the community or shelter the community or whatever. So it
Exactly.
is possible, like she's talking about.
Yeah. So what
But
what
there
are the
isn't-
next, what are the next steps, do you think? As
Well-
far as getting this out there, other than stuff like this, like what are your next steps to get this ball really, really rolling?
The Free Speech Network, they have the biggest audience.
Okay.
They have millions of people that watch their shows. They have people that follow. And I say free speech, I'm not just talking about journalists. I'm also talking about commentaries. I'm talking about people that just do video games and have a million viewers on there. But even you'll hear them say this all the time. I can't upset the YouTube gods. They're going to cut this off if I say this one thing. And
Really?
I'm like, yeah, these are people with millions of views.
Well,
there's-
I didn't realize it was hitting anybody besides like people that covered politics, to be honest with you.
No, this is people that are hitting video games, people that,
Oh,
but you'll see a breastfeeding video completely like out there and no one says anything.
right, right.
Yeah, and so that's sort of the thing, and those I can see being more the hardest people to get a hold of, because these people they're already probably making a couple tens of $1,000s a month off of their YouTube careers. But like, what do they do after if you guys are kicked off and YouTube's still censoring?
Right.
Self-preservation's gonna kick in. They're gonna be like, okay, and then next thing you know, all there is like tight, like turtleneck sweaters with like a cleavage hole or something.
True.
So glad I didn't buy that.
Oh, Jesus. You know who else would absolutely, I'm assuming, would absolutely love this is, I would guess, Ron Placone, because he is all about like eliminating censorship on the internet. I forget how he words it. Do you remember?
He words it a few different ways.
He words
but
it really
sums it
well.
up.
That's not how he says it, but this is a way to get that passed too, a direct way to get us to free speech on the internet too. So
Especially too, those interests in like public utilities, publicly owned utilities. It's all
thank
relative
you.
in a
That's what I
way,
was talking.
because like if we all have a say in the matter, then there isn't that feeling of insignificance as a citizen.
Yeah, I felt
that
like these
makes
went
sense.
hand in hand.
I reached out to him on the other part with the general strike. I have not reached out to him on the free speech networking, but maybe he could help me clear it out a bit more, because right now it's more of this like really rough idea. It's not really polished off at the moment,
Yeah.
but that would be really good.
Yeah. We'll send him this video, okay?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he could make more sense of like what that would look like, as not only he's in the scope, he's been targeted on by censorship, but also he's an advocate for not doing that. So yeah, maybe he'd be a great like I'm sure he doesn't have any time, but if he did have time, maybe he'd be a great leader for this whole thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
worst case scenario, just write the theme song for it.
No, but
I
he
mean,
he
yeah.
has done stuff for, I believe he was volunteering for like something with his city as far as the censorship goes. So like he is active in his community. So you never know. It doesn't hurt to reach out. I mean, we've now met because of Sharif and Graham, and that's how it works. It's
Yeah.
cool.
It's true. That's true. I would love it if you guys send a video and I'll send them a couple messages.
Yeah, for sure.
Were there any other questions? Did I forget anything?
Did you have anything for her? You
lot of
explained
info.
it so well.
I mean, honestly, thank you for opening our eyes a little bit, or making things a little clearer as far as especially the process, how that would go.
Yeah.
The nerd in me is excited for this to be over just so I can read more about it. But you answered a lot of questions. You cleared a lot of things up, and yeah, it's good stuff.
One more time, what was that book that you were recommended to read?
The Failures of Representative Government and the Solutions. And that's not failures of the Republicans, it's actual like representative government and how that fails. Because Rome fell with the representative government because they put all their money in the military, which is kind of exactly what we're doing.
Yeah. Exactly.
I wanted to, so there's the petition to hold a national vote, which I would love to get the Gravel Institute involved with that, because that's kind of their whole thing, is to finish his life's work, which is legislation. And then there's 3 pages that explain one, what direct democracy is. There's one for the amendment to the Constitution and the Legislative Procedures Act. And then there's this amazing interview by Dak Brullo on Overwritten about Mike Gravel and the book Failure of Representative Government and the Solution. And that's really where I got all of my education. I will link all of that to you guys in the chat really quick.
Perfect. And I will put it in the description box of the video when we post it.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you. Real quick, are you also including a link to the, what am I trying to say here? The petition.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Wanted to make sure everybody signed that.
Yeah.
And to the audience, if you guys can send this to Ron and Graham and the Gravel Institute and whoever else, like spread the word, share it everywhere, tag them in it.
Or even if any right person's looking on here and just putting troll comments, please pass it to all of your friends too.
Yeah, absolutely. This is how we get to work together and not have to deal with the people that are in charge right now. So
I am on board.
let me shrink
Okay,
this.
I believe that is all of them. Thank you for having us on today. Hopefully next time if we do this, Sharif can make it.
Yeah,
That'd be
that'd be fun.
He is a blast.
Part two.
Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you again. I know I was kind of a pain in the butt to get a hold of, but thank you for not letting go. I'm glad that we got to do this. So
Absolutely. Thank you again for having us.
of course, make sure you guys like, share, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and support the channel on Venmo, Patreon, sign that petition, and check out all the links below. Medicare be with you.